Welcome everyone to today's webcast about the evolution of EPDs to help make better design decisions. I don't know what it is, if it's July and people don't have a lot to do, or this is just a really popular topic, but we have been overwhelmed by the interest in this webinar. So it is being recorded. We will send you a link to that recording in the follow-up emails. We'll send you a PDF of the deck. There's a lot of content we're going to fly through, and you'll probably want to check some of the references, and we've provided those links. So without further ado, what we're doing is picking up on a webinar that we did late last year, the first in our series of webinars about EPDs. And the question that we posed in that first webinar, again, about are you able to use EPDs to make informed decisions? We wanted to immediately allay your fears. If you answered not really, it's not you, it's us, and us being us program operators, us people who make decisions about how EPDs get created and delivered. We've been using a technical standard, ISO 14045, for quite some time, and it's a great standard. I'm going to show you some of the language from it, but as you know, like anything else, it's all in the interpretation and then the execution. So today I'm really honored to have presenting Jim Mellentine and Angela Fisher, both who, again, very proud to have as members of the Sustainable Mines Technical Advisory Board, who oversee and maintain our technical program, our program operation technical program. In fact, Jim has been the chair for the last 3 years, and so has been through this evolution that we're going to cover today. And Angela joined last year, and we're thrilled to have her. So I'm going to give some context after this, again, the introduction, context for this webinar, and then Jim's going to talk about the importance of this mindset of shifting from disclosure in EPDs to now reporting performance. Angela's going to break down the attributes of LCAs and PCRs, again, as they are derived from ISO 14025, and how they have contributed to limiting the comparability of EPDs. And then I'm going to talk about how in the last couple years, there's been a lot of momentum to change the way these technical programs get written and delivered to start enabling more comparative decision making. And we're going to show you some things that are just getting started and really, I think, portend for a better future for evaluating environmental performance and being able to make better informed and more comparative decisions. At the end, we'll do a quick demo of the Transparency Catalog, because you've seen we've aggregated every manufacturer on their EPD in North America in the Transparency Catalog. And I'll show you quickly how to use the catalog to find those brands and those EPDs. And all along, feel free to type your questions into the questions panel. We have 2 folks on hand, our LCA analysts, to answer those questions. And if we don't answer your question during the webinar, we will definitely follow up, and we will work to leave a little bit of time at the end for live Q&A. For those of you who've not met Sustainable Mines before, I'm Terry Swack, the CEO and founder. I started the company now, it's hard to believe, 12 years ago. Our very first product was a streamlined eco-design and LCA tool delivered in the cloud cloud for product development teams to be able to evaluate the environmental performance of products in early stage concept design to make better decisions and bring greener products to market. In 2012, when LEED version 4 was introduced, with LCA being a cornerstone concept to provide information about product transparency, we took the same insights and intent to simplify LCA and make it more understandable and usable. We brought that same mindset to creating marketing tools, which is what an EPD is, and introduced this whole way of thinking about integrating product transparency into traditional product marketing, as it's now just another criteria that people use to make informed decisions. And ultimately, it's a continuous improvement loop. Manufacturers can start wherever they are. They can start in design and make improvements and then bring incredibly greener products to market and have something to talk about in their EPDs and in their marketing materials, or they can get started creating EPDs, doing LCAs and creating EPDs, finding out what's creating the greatest impacts and working to improve their products until the next time they go to report, and then they can actually talk about the improvements that have been made since the last time they reported. We are the only end-to-end product transparency solutions provider in the market today, really taking a holistic look at the entire process of being a program operator, making better PCRs and EPDs, delivering LCA and material evaluation services. It would be impossible to be a better program operator and be a better software company if we didn't have the technical capabilities ourselves to learn from and to drive ultimately better tools across to all of the folks who are involved in this ecosystem of designing, manufacturing, specifying, designing, and that loop continues to go around and around. So a little bit about the catalog. We first launched it in 2016 at Greenbuild. And I'm showing you this to give you some context for the evolution of not only EPDs, but of product transparency in North America. So when we launched the catalog in 2016, there were only 350 brands or manufacturers selling products in North America who had invested in either creating EPDs or one or more types of the material ingredient disclosures accepted at that time for LEED, LBC, and a few other rating system credits. Well, by the time 2017 rolled around, and our methodology for curating the content of the catalog is we continually monitor the rating systems that offer credits for environmental performance and material ingredients, and we continually monitor every program operator in North America and every material ingredient disclosure program, again, where their disclosures are accepted by the green building rating systems for product transparency credits. So 14 months later, at Greenbuild again, we released a new innovation with Knauf Insulation, Project Builder and Library. And by that time, in 14 months, the number of brands had practically tripled who had invested in EPDs and material ingredient disclosures, and increasingly manufacturers were beginning to invest in both types of disclosures. And that brings us to today. There are over 1,200 brands who have invested in product transparency. And from day one, the catalog, taking a long view on the market, has always been designed to be a specification tool. Because at the end of the day, only products that get into the specification have a chance of actually being purchased and used in the final built building. And so being able to easily find products, to get them into the spec, make it easy to communicate between all participants in the building process, architects, engineers, contractors, and owners, have access to those disclosures, make it fast, make it easy. This is what we're doing to achieve the vision and the desire that we all have, which is to actually reduce the impacts of the built environment on the natural environment and human health. So finally, in January of this year, there were enough manufacturers who had enough products across enough master format divisions to finally implement master format filtering. So now let's focus on the EPD side of the story. In January, when we launched version 2 with the master format filtering, there were 625 manufacturers in 20 master format divisions and over almost 1,800 EPDs for North America. Fast forward to essentially today, in 6.5 months, there's already been a 22% increase in the number of EPDs that have been published just in the last 6.5 months, an increase of almost 9% of the manufacturers, so another 50 plus have produced EPDs just again in the last 6.5 months. And only one new master format division, which means there's a lot going on already in the divisions where there's been a lot going on. So here's the breakdown. And I'm giving you kind of a little sneak preview of an announcement. Soon we will announce, and soon is a few days, what we're doing with the HPDC. We've been a partner of theirs for quite some time. We have taken the data from the API from the builder and now assigned all of the HPDs, even though they have master format numbers on them. We've looked through them all and have actually assigned them to the correct master format division sections if they didn't seem to be the right ones. So I'm just giving you a quick look here. We're going to be releasing more information about this shortly, but it's probably no surprise that concrete finishes and furnishings are the top divisions with the most activity. And notice where there's a lot of activity in EPDs, there's less activity on the material side. And when there's a lot of activity on the material side, there's a little bit less on the EPD side. That's a very interesting thing to dig into, which we will, but not on this webinar. That'll be another one, so stay tuned for that. And we'd just like to break it down, though, that just keep in mind that finishes is a really big division. So there's a lot of sections in finishes where there's a lot of activity going on, which is why you can see there's really the most activity in both types of product transparency disclosure in Division 9. So what is product transparency really about? And this is what you're all here today to learn more about, is it's about performance. It's a new, and not so new anymore, performance criteria that you use to make trade-off decisions about the products that you're specifying to go into your projects. Environmental performance is now part of the definition of what a high-performance building includes. It is a performance metric now included in that definition. So going back to why do an LCA manufacturers and material assessments, those technical tools are first and foremost for the manufacturer to gain insight into the environmental performance and human health impacts over the life cycle of their products, so they actually know how to make improvements, where meaningful improvements can be made, and where they really can innovate and differentiate in the market. So why is improving performance important now? We're all here because we know why it's important now. We don't have any more time. Again, the long view is facing us in the face. 2020, 2030, 2050, right around the corner. Actual performance matters. It's not just about disclosure anymore. Actual performance matters, and you can't manage what you don't measure. So at the end of the day, this goes back to our intent to integrate product transparency into product marketing. We believe product transparency builds credibly greener brands, but not by just producing disclosures. The value for manufacturers to provide environmental information about their products comes from them being able to demonstrate that they understand what the information means and they're actually doing something with it. Now, quick view of ISO 14025. I'm just going to show you what's on the very first page of 14025. It calls for the harmonization of program instructions and rules. So it's always been calling for program operators to work together, to harmonize, to make their technical programs as similar as possible, and to recognize the processes and the procedures that have been put in place and the formats. So, it's always been encouraging standardization. It's also always been encouraging us program operators to consider the information needs of different types of purchasers and to pay attention to the level of awareness or understanding of the target audience. And so for us, what that means for Sustainable Minds is loading up an EPD with pages and pages of tabular LCA results is not considering the information needs of this particular audience, you, that we're talking to. Even though you're highly aware, that's not a great way of delivering the information, because at the end of the day, again, this is all on the front page. The purpose of a Type 3 environmental declaration, so EPD is a colloquialism, they're called Type 3 environmental declarations, is to encourage the demand and supply for these products that actually do create less impact through communicating verifiable and accurate information, and also calling out that these declarations are not comparative assertions, right? They're not intended for one manufacturer to be able to make a claim, a measured, data-driven claim about the relative performance of someone else's products, which is exactly what you're asking for and what the market really needs. So what we're going to be talking about today is how, while still working within the confines or the directives of 14025, how EPDs are changing to be able to deliver that information for you to be able to make better informed and comparative decisions. So with that, Jim, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, and hello, everyone. Just by way of brief introductions. Oh, there it goes. Ramble is a 74-year-old company of engineers, designers, consultants. We are 15,000 experts across 300 offices in 35 countries. And we work in a variety of sectors in areas like environment and health, energy, water, buildings, transport, and planning and urban design. I myself am located in the Denver, Colorado office and focus on corporate sustainability services. I've been developing LCAs and EPDs since 2010. And in my spare time, I also teach a graduate course in sustainable materials to our next generation of architects and designers. And then to complement what Terry was saying about the growth of EPDs over time, this chart is from Jane Anderson at Construction LCA over in the UK. And every year she does a survey of program operators and tracks that over time. And this is a mostly European perspective, whereas Terry showed you the North American perspective. There are a couple of US program operators in here, including UL and SCS, but mostly in Europe. And so as you can see in 2011, starting at less than 500 EPDs, and now in 2019, we're at over 6,000 EPDs, and that's quite a growth. That means there's a bigger and more sophisticated audience out there that's consuming these EPDs, and there are more and better disclosures out there. And it's worth going ahead and patting yourselves on the back for that, because you deserve it. You're part of the community that has enabled this. But now it's on to the next challenge. All right, so when I talk about shifting from disclosure to performance, let's just refresh on the disclosure part of it. Why have EPDs been focused on disclosure so far? It's because that's what's been rewarded in green building systems. This is a familiar formula for many of you. You have in LEED version 4, you have the product-specific EPDs worth 1 product, and then you have the industry average EPDs worth a half a product, and then reviewed LCAs worth 1/4 of a product. And projects that want to earn that credit have to have at least 20 products, and then you get a point. There's a second option that does begin to reward performance, and that's that 50% of products need to show lower impacts in 3 out of the 6 categories compared to an industry average, and that's also worth 1 point. But there are challenges with that second option that make it very difficult to achieve, and so not many projects have actually pursued it. And some of those challenges are that until recently, there weren't a lot of EPDs to constitute 50% of product costs to achieve that threshold. And even in product categories with EPDs, there wasn't always an industry average benchmark to compare to. And when there was, it wasn't always clear what an acceptable industry benchmark is and how to justify that comparison, especially if they're completed in completely separate systems and with different characteristics. And lastly, less impact is not always a meaningful performance threshold. Technically, you could have a product that has a very little amount of less impact in those 3 categories, but much higher impacts in the other 3 categories, and that would still meet this criteria, but might not necessarily be a better product. So what does that mean? Customers want to understand achievements of product manufacturers. And as you saw, thousands of EPDs have been published in response to this demand for disclosure, but they usually don't demonstrate any improvements over anything. And that's entirely understandable. The industry really needed to be educated on EPDs and what they mean, and they needed to grow a proficient workforce and have more sophisticated tools available to enable this type of communication. And all of that's happened. The industry has grown and evolved, and now there is a large body of data from those published EPDs, as the charts that I showed and that Terry showed earlier attest to. We have more and better data sets available for materials and energy. Manufacturers and customers have a better understanding of LCAs and EPDs, and the general awareness of environmental challenges and best practices have increased enough such that customers do want to see manufacturers reduce their impacts. And manufacturers are now sophisticated enough to be able to demonstrate those reductions. So, if you ask this question, how are you reducing impacts from a life cycle perspective back in 2009, you might have had a bit of head scratching from a lot of different manufacturers. Not all, certainly. LCAs and EPDs have been around for a little while longer than that, but certainly there weren't nearly as many folks who understood this as now in 2019, where you have many manufacturers have the ability to provide a sophisticated response to that question. And now you see that manufacturers are starting to demonstrate performance. And Unfortunately, there are not really many examples out there, very few actually. Not many companies have published performance improvements as part of their EPDs, but the good news is that we, and I mean a collective we, including you all in the audience, that means that we have the opportunity to shape what this looks like going forward. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we want to maximize the usefulness of this information to the people that are actually making the decisions about which products to specify in these projects. And so far, the manufacturers who have done this have gone back to their LCA model from a previous generation product. They've updated the model to use consistent process data, consistent characterization methods, and generate results using the same software. And that consistency helps enable better comparability. And here's an example. This is an Owens Corning product. I pulled off the UL website. And this is, keep in mind, this is just a 2-page addendum disclosure. I'm just showing 1 page. And if you kind of zoom into the bottom here, you can see that it shows impact reductions compared to their previous product-specific EPD that was published in 2013. And they have a visual demonstration of those reductions as well as the numerical demonstration of those reductions. But what's next? Well, on the horizon, we do have these new performance options in LEED version 4.1. The first one is lifecycle impact reduction action plans. In addition to a product-specific LCA or EPD, if you want this action plan, you want to do a critically reviewed and product-specific action plan that mitigates lifecycle impacts and is publicly available. And it should include a few basic things that you would expect it to include, such as the description of the LCA, the data, the software used. It identifies the largest impact areas and those impact areas that you target for reduction. It should have specific anticipated implementation steps for how you will achieve those reductions, and then an anticipated timeline for completion with specific dates. You also have the second option, which is the life cycle impact reduction in embodied carbon. And that's really focused on the global warming potential metric. So the product-specific LCA or EPD has demonstrated the GWP reductions and meets the comparability requirements of ISO 14025 and ISO 21930. And Angela is going to talk more about comparability and what some of those criteria are. Those reductions must be third-party verified and include a description of how the reduction was achieved. And there are 3 performance thresholds in this credit, which is, you have to have any reduction, and or you could have greater than or equal to 10% reduction, and that's worth 1.5 products or 150% by cost. And then the biggest threshold is at least a 20% GWP reduction and at least a 5% reduction in 2 other impact categories, and those will count as 2 products or 200% by cost. So what would I like you to take away from this section of the presentation? It's that if you are a manufacturer, you may have a beautiful EPD, and that's great, but don't rest on those laurels. This is what's coming next. You should plan on measuring and demonstrating improvements in your products, and that likely includes collaborating with product designers, and if they're not already involved, and making this more of a system and integration into your existing processes. For the AECs in the audience, you should definitely be asking for this information, recognizing that it's performance information is still growing, but don't just ask for it. You should be rewarding manufacturers by specifying those improved products as long as it meets all of your other criteria. And that's what's going to encourage manufacturers to make and communicate meaningful changes and environmental impact reductions in their products. For the LCA practitioners in the audience, you can enable and encourage this shift to performance. Get away from the cookie cutter LCA EPD model that we've had over the last decade or so, and start encouraging and challenging your clients or your internal teams to really systematize these product improvements. Make it a part of your standard product design process. And it helps to remember that this is why you got into LCA in the first place. You want to be able to enable these better products that have less impact on the environment. And so this is really what you've been waiting for. Let your passion shine and really grow this performance agenda as part of your LCA and EPD program. So I appreciate the time. And with that, I will transition over to Angela.
Great, thank you, Jim. That was really encouraging to hear from your presentation that more and more emphasis is being placed on performance and optimization rather than simply transparency and disclosure. That's really our overarching goal in environmental disclosure, is to help people make better and more informed product sustainability decisions. So again, thank you all for joining the webinar today. Great concept today. And I'll just give a brief introduction to self, if I can advance the slide. So my name is Angela Fisher. I'm the co-founder and chief sustainability strategist for Aspire Sustainability. I'm a certified lifecycle assessment professional, an International Society of Sustainability Professionals Sustainability Associate, and as a lead green associate. Prior to forming Aspire Sustainability, I spent nearly 13 years with General Electric and also worked with Vail Resorts. I received my graduate degree in environmental engineering from Penn State with a concentration in sustainability and technology, and my bachelor's in environmental resource management. I currently live, work, and play in beautiful Breckenridge, Colorado, and can usually be found actively enjoying nature and the variety of outdoor activities here in the Rocky Mountains. So that is me, but now a quick introduction to Aspire Sustainability. So we are a deliberately small, purpose-driven strategic sustainability consulting firm. Aspire's experts are a spinoff from General Electric's renowned Eco Assessment Center of Excellence. So we're really excited to share the diverse and global experiences from our many years with GE with the many other organizations out there who are dedicated to a more sustainable global marketplace. So this is from large multinational companies to small driven startups. We've pioneered many successful corporate and product sustainability programs and have the expertise, passion, and know-how to deliver innovative yet really practical and impactful solutions to ensure business prosperity. Our key expertise lies in the areas of product sustainability and lifecycle assessment, science-based strategy and goal development, circular economy, advisory and critical review support, and integrating all of this into effective sustainability programs that drive business value. All right, so let's jump into the presentation by talking a little bit about the process for developing an EPD. So what we really want to understand what attributes we should be looking for if we want to identify more sustainable product choices. The first step in the process is to identify an existing product category rule for your product. If one doesn't exist, the PCR can be created with the help of a program operator. Next, we'll enlist the help of an expert LCA practitioner to perform the lifecycle assessment based on those requirements of the PCR. From the detailed LCA, we'll make an environmental product declaration that can be developed to summarize the environmental performance and findings in a summary report format, and then reviewed and verified for conformance to the standards. And finally, your program operator will certainly assist in registering and publishing the EPD. In order for product specifiers and other decision makers to be able to choose those more sustainable products, we really want to be able to compare the EPDs between functional equivalent options. The ISO 14025 standard that Terry introduced us to clearly states the conditions that have to be necessary for comparability between different types of type 3 EPDs. So we're going to be talking about many of the attributes of the ISO 14025 standard that you can see here on the screen in more detail on the later slides. But I thought it would be helpful and compelling for you to see everything on one slide, that the many attributes that need to be identical according to ISO 14025 for valid comparability. Product category rules are the documents that provide rules, requirements, and guidelines for developing an EPD for a specific product category. Those are part of the ISO 14025 standard that enable transparency and comparability between EPDs. The rules provide a level playing field, which enables apples-to-apples comparison, or in the case of building products, ceiling tiles to be compared with ceiling tiles, or plumbing fixtures to plumbing fixtures. So in theory, manufacturers and LCA practitioners should not have multiple PCR options to choose from when deciding to develop an EPD. However, there has been lack of global harmonization between PCRs and sector guidance documents in the past that has led to the development of duplicate PCRs for some of the same products. So this slide illustrates some of the attributes of a PCR that we can look at that might cause variability and differences and therefore affect valid comparability. I've also added a little asterisk next to the ones that are specifically called out in the ISO 14025 standard. So a couple of the things, the overarching standard behind the PCR may be different. There are a variety of program operators out there who may have differences in their general program requirements, in their product category definitions, and in reporting format. And also there's differing degrees of specificity in terminology. So some rules, for example, some rules allow modules to be combined into one result instead of 3 separate results, which could affect folks' ability to compare. There's differing global geographies that can have significantly different results due to impacts such as energy and transport. For example, using a country average rather than a state or region-specific energy mix. The reference service life and the functional equivalence. As an LCA practitioner, we know that if the functional units are not aligned, the results should never, certainly never be compared. Then there's the reference study period and time horizons. Temporal differences can certainly result in differences in environmental impacts. Use and maintenance assumptions may differ, or in other life cycle stages where inclusion or exclusion of certain life cycle aspects or data requirements may not be equivalent. And lastly, varied interpretation. So PCRs are usually set in a way that allows the program operator to interpret these rules in different ways. Next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the lifecycle assessment process. So LCA is a robust ISO standardized methodology that we all use to quantify the net environmental impact of a product, technology, a service, an entire building, or even an organization across its value chain. It evaluates the impacts on the environment throughout its entire lifespan. So this is from raw material extraction and pre-processing to manufacturing, packaging, and distribution through use, end of life, disposal. It's a really credible tool. That's great for uncovering improvement opportunities throughout the life cycle. And it's really that science behind the EPDs that employs pre-existing consensus-based technical studies and research. So LCA is defined by 4 iterative methodological steps. The first is the goal and scope definition. This is where you lay out the context of the study, define the functional unit and the system boundary to be studied, and then explain how the results will be communicated. The next step is the lifecycle inventory, and this is really where you're just compiling and quantifying all those inputs and outputs for your product system across its lifecycle, This is also called kind of the data collection stage. It's generally the most time-consuming step when you're performing an LCA. The next step is the life cycle impact assessment. So this is really where we're aiming to understand and evaluate the magnitude and the significance of the potential environmental impacts for a product system. It's really where you're converting that inventory data you collected into environmental impacts. And then the last iterative step is interpretation, and where you're going to evaluate your findings relative to your study's goal and scope in order to reach conclusions and make recommendations. And LCA does have additional specifications around the reporting and critical review aspects. So according to the ISO standards, there's a lot more strictness around making public comparative assertions or claims of superiority. So many of these comparability conditions that were described in ISO 14025 relate to how the LCA study is performed. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates some of the attributes of lifecycle assessments that should be considered when we're attempting product comparability. So lifecycle-based quantitative claims for products require that LCA practitioners make many choices regarding sources of data, the boundaries of our system, allocation of impacts between co-products or recycled products, and the choice of metrics that we use to estimate these impacts. Again, I've added asterisks by the ones that are specifically called out in ISO 14025. So there are a number of system boundary options in LCA, including cradle to gate with options, and cradle to grave. I previously talked about functional units, so this is the basis for comparison. If it is not identical or well-defined, there is really no legitimacy for comparison. There can be many differences in environmental impact categories. For example, a multi-impact versus a carbon footprint only study. There are also a variety of impact assessment methods that can result in differences, even for the same impact category. The allocation rules and approaches to allocation and byproducts and co-products can also be subjective and vary by practitioner. Unfortunately, too, the experience, credentials, ethics, and technical rigor of LCA practitioners can vary. There are also a number of LCA calculation tools available, such as Gabi, CIMA-Pro, OpenLCA, and Athena, each with its own strengths, weaknesses, and differences. Similarly, there are a lot of LCA databases, data sources out there, like the EcoInvent database, USLCI, the ELCD. Again, they have varying levels of specificity and completeness. There's also differences in data sources, such as primary data collection versus using generic or industry average data, or maybe there's unclear descriptions of data quality rules or inconsistent levels of detail that could contribute to variability. The treatment of biogenic carbon is another area gaining additional visibility. So this is an area within LCA, though, that can be interpreted and performed differently in different studies. And then at end of life, treatment and cutoff rules may be different. So this would be considering reuse, recovery, and recycling potentials, whether or not waste processing and disposal stages are all included, or even accounting for the impact of packaging materials. And then similar to my comment around LCA practitioners, there's also some differences in experiences and ethics and rigor in critical review. So we should be aware of all of these. Next slide. But on a happier note, there are some changes on the horizon that are aimed at making comparability more straightforward and transparency documents more harmonized. The new lead beta guidance requires summary sheets of specific information to be included in EPDs that should really help us to clarify comparability questions and uncertainty. The guidance states that product-specific and industry-wide EPDs have to provide a cover sheet, a separate cover or summary sheet that includes all of these things listed here. So clearly all the requirements outlined in LEAD, the name and credentials of the folks conducting the LCA, the type of software used, the date of the assessment and period of validity, the reference PCR, names of different regions that are covered by the EPD, and a link to the publicly available documentation. As you can see from the snapshot of the EPD below for ISO latex, this information is actually beginning to make its way out to decision makers, which is a great thing. Next slide. So I do find it very encouraging that the steps are being taken to improve this comparability and ensure that it is a valid comparison. So as an LCA practitioner and an engineering nerd, I really wanted to share a few more of the attributes that I personally would like to see disclosed in an EPD summary sheet that would really help to further clarify comparability attributes and reduce other uncertainties when these documents are being used for product decision making. So many of the items that were included in the transparency report on the previous slide are here, but just a little bit of additional detail and some supporting documentation could really help to answer those questions of comparability. So in this little table, the first column, I've listed the attributes that I would like to see. So this is kind of like a wish list in a summary sheet. The second column is drawn directly from that ISO LaTeX transparency report that we saw. And then the third column is what the new LEED 4.1 beta guidance document is requiring in the summary sheet. So we have everything from the reference PCR and version number, which seems to only be required in industry-wide EPDs for the new LEED guidance. None of them require the reference standard, but that would be useful information. Clearly, we want to know the date of publication and the period of validity to know if the two are comparable. The functional unit, as I mentioned, is critical for ensuring comparability. The market or the regions that are covered, system boundaries, again, is it cradle to gate, is it cradle to grave? And the next couple is really knowing the database and the software used and the version numbers are really important because as different software programs get updated, the data can change the results. Your LCA practitioners and critical reviewers should be experienced and have credentials such as an LCA certified practitioner, or just really be robust and unbiased in their analyses and review. And then definitely links to the public reports and documentation so that folks can go dig into the data a little bit further for comparison. Next slide. So just to wrap things up, I think that in today's marketplace, transparency and commitment to sustainability are business imperatives. You just have to do it. This really creates your stakeholder value. It maximizes your environmental benefits and hopefully will ensure long-term business prosperity. So similar to what Jim did, I wanted to just identify some things specific to our audience as a little bit of takeaways. So for manufacturers, you can really exhibit the sustainability commitment and leadership that's really going to be important for customer satisfaction, engaging with all of your stakeholders and increasing market share. You can also really support informed product decision-making by using LCA to discover those improvement opportunities that have the largest meaningful impact for product optimization. And clearly calculating and demonstrating those improvements over time or between product generations can illustrate your commitment to a more sustainable global marketplace. For the AECs, you can support informed sustainability decision-making by understanding EPD comparability attributes, which I talked today about within the LCA methodology and also within PCRs. And that can really help reward manufacturers for demonstrating their commitment to environmental transparency and improved product performance. And then lastly, the LCA practitioners on the line, we can support informed sustainability decision-making by performing really robust assessments and providing that transparent documentation, the results, and all the comparability attributes that other folks are going to need. We also really want to be able to continue to encourage our clients to implement and document these footprint reduction activities and to execute ongoing improvement actions. That's all I have for you. So thank you again for your time and attention, and I'll pass things back to Terry.
Thank you, Angela. Even being in the LCA business ourselves, your presentation is just daunting of all the things that we're all trying to deal with, and hoping that folks who are attending the webinar today are feeling a little bit more optimistic that people are working on this problem and there are changes being made, and that's what I'm going to dive into now. Programs that are happening to make comparison possible, and really the go-to tool for comparison are industry-wide EPDs. However, most industry-wide EPDs up until recently were never created for the purpose of serving as a category benchmark to which product-specific EPDs could be compared. And so I'm going to show you the work that's been happening the last couple of years to change the guidance for industry-wide EPDs so they can be used as category benchmarks. But as you know, or may not, PCRs take a long time to create, and that's because it's industry groups who have to work through some challenging questions, oftentimes without agreement coming easily. And so if we're really trying to fast track improving environmental performance and getting more transparency and better products out there, there's got to be other avenues for expediting this ability to extract performance information and use it to make comparisons. And so I like to say, you know, it's now is the time that really we're starting to put EPD data to work. And I'm going to show you two examples of programs that are up and running, and I think portend positive things for the future. A little bit of context, back in 2016, the USGBC put together a temporary working group to work on developing guidance for how to create industry-wide EPDs to serve as product group benchmarks to which product-specific EPDs could be compared. We gave back to the USGBC a pretty lengthy response. While we were on the same page, we did not feel that it was appropriate for the USGBC to be creating a new technical standard that was tied to a single program operator's program, and really lobbied for that guidance to be able to be used as an overlay to different technical programs, again, to help bring those programs into consistency rather than creating additional language for one single program operator's program. That is, in fact, what happened, and was published as an overlay, and so people have adopted it. Program operators have adopted it or not. And here's what UL has done, which is great. We're actually using this PCR right now and creating an industry-wide EPD working from these requirements. And so what they've done is they've written into, and I think pretty much all of their new PCRs, they're writing into the PCR a section on how to do an industry average or industry-wide EPD to serve as a category benchmark, and that's just a new section in the PCR. Now, I just want to preface this by saying, again, back on page 1 of the ISO standard, remember, these are called Type 3 environmental declarations, and right there at the bottom of the front page, it says a program operator can call their Type 3 environmental declarations anything they want. So we chose to call ours a transparency report. A transparency report is our brand of Type 3 environmental declaration. And the reason we called it that, even though it's required us to do some education, is we wanted to indicate and signal to the market there was something different about it. It was more than just the typical PDF EPD with a lot of pages of LCA tabular data, and it also gives us some latitude to add additional and useful content, which is what we're going to show you now. So the transparency report is in the cloud. It's always been in the cloud. It's always 3 pages. The first page has everything someone's going to want to know about the product, all of the reporting information that Angela showed. This is an older version before we've added the summary. Page 2 gives the LCA results and interpretation and what the manufacturer is doing to improve. And page 3, which is optional, the manufacturer can talk about every single thing that they're doing in any or all stages of the product's life cycle to contribute to the performance improvement that they're reporting here on page 2. So when we brought this to market in 2013, these were already the contents of the 3 pages focused on letting the manufacturer tell that story. But again, this is optional content, and it's optional because ISO 14025 does not require manufacturers to tell that story. It's optional. However, LCA results is required. And again, it's based on different technical standards, different program operators, how much information about the LCA results they put into the EPD. But in our technical program, we got very, very specific about the content requirements of a transparency report, and very specific about only LCA results that help the intended user be able to understand the environmental performance of this particular product and know what's contributing to those impacts. So in our Part A, and we actually created the first two-part PCR program for North America, a PCR defines, in our Part A, defines how the LCA rules should be applied across every product category. So there's only one set of LCA rules. So this is for consistency and conformity. And a very prescriptive set of content requirements based on ISO 14025 content requirements of what should go into a type 3 environmental declaration, whether it's a transparency report or an EPD, and what that content should be communicating. We've added that to those requirements. The Part B is a very simple form. Again, it's standardized. Product manufacturers are able to convene groups, work on a lot of this input themselves with the assistance of an LCA provider or Sustainable Minds. But again, every Part B is published in a standardized form. And when the benchmarking came up, again, we approached it in a very standardized way and decided that rather than adding the benchmarking guidance to the Part B, because it takes more time to create that benchmarking guidance, to add it as an appendix so the working group can decide whether they want to do it or not, and so that it doesn't slow down the creation of the Part B, because the industry-wide EPD needs to be created before anybody can do a comparative product-specific EPD anyway. And so by breaking those things apart, it allows deliverables to be created in a more reasonable time frame. And further, there are so many PCRs that exist today that don't expire for some time. You want to be able to add those benchmarking guidance rules to those existing PCRs, and so doing it through an addendum seemed like the way to go. So in our technical program, a Part A plus a Part B plus a benchmarking addendum now gives the user a consistent and standardized approach. We also have designed a comparative transparency report where not only is the data being added to the results of the impact category, but we're requiring that the manufacturer actually be able to tell the story about which impact categories have gotten improved or not. And again, not just through tabular or information graphics, but by actually explaining what they've done to achieve those improvements. And further, here's the big question is the uncertainty section. Making sure that the uncertainty thresholds are validated so that the improvement that they're reporting relative to the benchmark is outside the range of uncertainty so that the improvements are meaningful. Very quickly, because we're at the top of the hour, so I'll ask you for 2 more minutes, we'll wrap up. You may already have heard about EC3, Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator. They're building a calculator, it's in beta, it should be ready later this year. to help manufacturers convey the embodied carbon impacts and to let architects, engineers, and contractors calculate the embodied carbon in the total amount that they're specifying in a project. And so what EC3 is doing is pulling the global warming potential score that's in every EPD, aggregating those scores and applying a methodology that essentially says, let's look at the 80-20 rule. Let's look at the range of uncertainty. Let's look at a threshold of no more than 80% of best in class, and creating a range to which the product-specific result can be compared. This will really expedite that ability to make comparisons, but again, the proof will be in how the methodology is written. It's in draft right now. A new release will be coming out in the next month, and it will be reviewed until the industry feels confident that it is an acceptable methodology for averaging data and using it in this way. And finally, in Europe, in data, a new initiative was launched last month, which is an international open data network for sustainable building and creating a digital data exchange of EPD data with a lot of requirements about how the data gets created, how it gets stored, and ultimately how it will be used in the publishing process. Again, links to this reference information are here in the deck. But the real point is to say, look, we've got to get out of the world of publishing to PDFs, because encoding data in a static format does not help us put that data to work. And so at Sustainable Minds, as a cloud software developer and a program operator, the purpose and the reason for us to aggregate all EPDs for North American products in one place means that we can start digitizing that data and delivering it to you in tools that help put that data to work. So to wrap up the message from today's webinar, again, just really reinforcing what both Jim and Angela said. Look for manufacturers who understand what the environmental performance of their products means. Look for those who can talk about what they're doing to make improvements. Specify those products, support those manufacturers, because if we don't, we're not going to see the kind of improvements, real improvements in the market that we need. I'm going to wrap up and thank you for staying. Again, you'll get the link to the recording and the PDF of the deck in the next couple days, and we'll follow up with any questions that didn't get answered during the webinar. And thank you and have a great day. And thank you, Jim and Angela. Great job.